You're listening to Art Affairs, episode 41. Today I'll be talking to Eric Nakamura. Alright, so my name's Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. Art Affairs is my attempt at shining a spotlight on the many wonderful people that make up this amazing art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, telling their stories. You can dig through previous episodes, complete with show notes, at artaffairs.podcast.com, but the best way to stay plugged in is to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're really enjoying the show and want to help support what I'm doing here in an even bigger way, check out the Art Affairs Patreon. Not only does it give you an opportunity to help keep the show going, but there are several community-oriented benefits as well, like getting early access to episodes and suggesting questions for upcoming guests. You can find all the information for that at patreon.com/artaffairs. You can also connect with the show on Instagram and Facebook at Art Affairs Podcast. All right, so today's guest is the giant robot himself, Eric Nakamura. Eric has had a long and rich career in which he's worn many different hats, but has also had a profound impact on the community. We talk about the different forms his career has taken over the years and how each one of those has very organically led to the next. What led him to opening his gallery GR2, how he's adapted his business in the wake of COVID, and so much more. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Eric Nakamura. Eric, welcome to the show, man. I'm excited to have you on.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, awesome. So let's talk a little bit about your background. And from what I've read, you grew up in the Sawtell area of West LA, which is obviously where you're doing business today. But then I think like midway through your childhood, you moved more to like the suburbs and to more like a white affluent area. What kind of work did your parents do that sort of got you guys moving around?
My mother owned a restaurant, and she owned it from 1970 to 2003. And that's like this kind of a thing where the restaurant started tiny, and her work time was, always at work. And my father was he started off as an auto mechanic, kind of like a handy person. Mm. He eventually went into, he opened like a small bunch of restaurants himself, like small, like takeout kind of thing. Ultimately didn't work. And then he did general contracting work. So he kind of did everything.
Didn't your parents meet? Like one of the old fashioned meet cutes where your mom's car broke down and she got it fixed at the gas station where your dad worked. Like, isn't that's the most adorable story?
Yeah, literally true. It was right in that area, right? Sawtell, Japantown area. But yeah, my mother's car broke down. Then my dad worked at a gas station up the street. And I forgot what happened, like how that exactly happened. But I know he had to walk, a few blocks to their car, which broke down on the street. And that's where he met everybody. My mother and her sisters, I believe it was everybody, but yeah, ultimately that's where that all happened.
That's amazing. And so you're third generation Japanese American. So does that mean that it was your grandparents that first immigrated to the US?
Yeah. So my grandfather on my dad's side probably came to the US. I think, I can't remember the dates anymore. It was either like 1900 or 1895 or something like that, right? And then on my mother's side, they came after World War II, probably somewhere like in 1950 or something like that, and maybe 55, something like that.
Okay.
And that's when they came to America. So a little, both a little bit different.
Sure. And I read that part of your childhood, you went to Japanese school on Saturdays and after school. For those unfamiliar, what exactly is Japanese school? Is that just language or is it more than that?
The language school, it's not a high grade school, I would say. It's kind of it's made for people like myself who, born in America, who spoke only English at home. And, then you're off to learn Japanese language on your spare time. But I would say that school isn't great because there's actually good Japanese schools made for people who speak Japanese at home. So that's higher level. The one I was at was kind of the lowest possible level of a Japanese school, but better than nothing. But still, you're not really practicing well because at home you're still speaking English. It's sort of like you're learning while you're there. You do homework while you're at home, but you're not practicing.
Yeah. Do you feel that your Japanese heritage had a strong presence in your life growing up, even though you were several generations removed, or was that more of a distant thing that you kind of embraced later?
Even if you're not into it, it's still there. So whether you could say, I didn't really care about it growing up. It was so there all the time that you cannot care, but it's still ingrained in your life. So, yeah, no matter what I can say, yeah, I grew up not thinking about it, but it was such a presence all the time that you can't really run away from it. And I think anyone who would say that it wasn't a presence, I mean, it is, how can I not say it's not? It was a heavy presence all the time. So, definitely today, I mean, I could look back thinking, God, there's so many memories and so many little details of maybe behaviors that that are part of my life that I know it's part of growing up that way.
Interesting. Yeah. And I know in addition to that, though, you also got into things like punk music and BMX bikes, skateboarding, all that sort of stuff. How did you get into punk music? That seems to be a common thread with a lot of the people that I've talked to.
Really?
Yeah.
It's surprising. I wonder why, or I wonder how. So like growing up as a kid, I was into like metal, but then it just kind of progressed into like punk rock, indie rock, all kinds of, all the different micro genres of kind of indie music, you would say, like, non big record label stuff. I mean, all the little micro genres, I was so into many of them. It just kind of happened, I guess. I think I just didn't fit into a lot of the crowds at the time. And whether I was rebelling or whether it's just naturally me, I was just kind of awkward. It attracted me to that music where I think everyone was fairly awkward.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, I feel like these are the people that I identify with most, even if they weren't at my school. Let's say I just felt like I identified with the sound and what they were into, the aesthetic and all those kind of all those little details. I would think that that's sort of how I grew up, and it just kind of let me be me, whatever that was. I don't even know what that was, but I think it just let me be me. And that was my route anyway, the best I can do.
Yeah, sure. Were you interested in art at all as a kid when you were growing up? Much exposure to that?
I think most kids, it seems like whether you're good at it or not, like drawing. It just seems like drawing or doing crafts or just things that they do at school are always geared toward doing something with your creativity and with your hands. And that's when you're very young. I just think that's just, instead of like an English lesson or a math lesson, I think doing something with your hands in arts and crafts kind of a category seems to be something that everybody does. I don't think there's, I think that's just everybody does it in some way. So that happened. But then I guess over time, it just stuck with me a little bit. I was interested in art, doing art, drawing, stuff like that. But going to see art, not so much. I think I saw a King Tut exhibition that came through Los Angeles, and that was at a museum. So it's one of my early memories of going to a museum is seeing a King Tut exhibit. Everything was behind glass or plexiglass or whatnot, but it's just seeing those treasures at a museum was very interesting because it was one of those things where it was a spectacle, long lines. And it's since come back maybe twice, but I saw a version that was probably in the late 70s.
Oh, wow.
Maybe, or 77, was it? Or something like that. It just came through and it was on an American tour. But I think, going to museums and things like that, it's just almost like something to do. Less me really knowing what I'm looking at. It was always like, oh, we're going to a museum. I'm like, okay. It's just like going to a zoo. It's not much different, right? You're just going to see something. You might not know what it is, but you're just looking. So I'm just looking at it. It's just like looking at animals, you know?
Right on, right on.
It's almost the same thing.
Very cool. So when it came time to go to college, you first went to Santa Monica College, which is a community college there. Why did you go there? What drove you there?
I think I went to Santa Monica College because I felt that going to a 4-year university, that I really didn't get into the schools I wanted to get into. So I think instead of going to, let's say, a Cal State school, which I'm sure is really great, but at the time I thought was absolutely terrible. I don't know, just ego talking of some sort, right? I thought I was smarter than I was, perhaps, or better at school than I was. But once I started to realize that I'm not going to get into any of the schools that I wanted to get into, I decided, again, like kind of rebelling. I was like, well, you know what? I'm not going to go to any school at that point. Like, I'm not going to go to anything that I got into, and I'm just going to go to the community college instead. But I did get into some schools. I just didn't want to go to those. Okay. And they were all like, the state schools that were not as good, et cetera. It's deemed not as good anyway. I'm sure they're awesome, but at the time I thought, oh, that school's garbage. I got in as my lowest possible backup, and I decided I think junior college would be about the same. So
okay,
I chose to go to junior college, and ultimately I wasn't ready to go to school or more school, and it was the right decision because it took me a very long time to get out of junior college, but it was probably the best decision I made coming out of high school was to do that, because I ended up maybe took a semester or two off at certain times, and certain semesters you take one class only because I was just so burned out, right? I couldn't do it. So that actually was probably ultimately the wisest decision that I made, but it was made out of rebelling, not out of like self-care, right? It wasn't really about that. It was all about rebelling.
I'll show you.
And, I'll show all of you that I'm going to go to a junior college, the worst thing of all, right? Which isn't true, but at the time it was looked at as being terrible. Like, you are a failure. You went to junior college. Right? It's sort of like that. It's the 13th grade. Yeah.
And I went to junior college for many of the same reasons. Like, I wasn't sure exactly. I mean, I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but it wasn't something I felt passionate about. And then it was great because I ended up completely changing my path, So
yeah, same here. It was this great experience where I learned probably more than I did, because I eventually transferred to I went to San Francisco State for a semester, then UCLA. And I finished up, but I think the greatest time where I learned the most might have been at that junior college. And it was little to do with school subject matter. That was almost like irrelevant. It was everything else outside of school that I learned, in that time.
Was it around the same time that you were doing photography for the Palisadian Post? Was that the same time frame?
Yeah, it was during that time at junior college. I got like a job, a real world job at it's a local newspaper, but it was like a wet darkroom still, like pre-digital. I was the only photographer, so I was now responsible for a newspaper. Oh, was it weekly? A weekly newspaper's photography. And that was kind of a fairly big responsibility for a junior college student. And I was really serious about photography. So I had a photojournalism teacher. This is amazing, right? At junior college, it was called the Herald Examiner, which then went defunct later. But he was one of the best photographers there. Maybe he was the best one there. A guy named Jim Rubesman. Amazing. Great photographer. And then he was the teacher at Santa Monica College. And I'm like, oh, this guy? Like, I was a guy that was buying newspapers just to look at the photos because I wanted to see. So I knew the names of every photographer, like, in Los Angeles. I knew all the pro photographers' names. So if I went to an event, I would go, oh, there's so-and-so, there's so-and-so, and there's so-and-so, and they're shooting this like Dodger game. And I could see them. And I'm like, oh, there they are. I know those guys, like who they are. They don't know me, but I'm watching them. I'm not watching the game. I'm watching the photographers. So, and then one of them became the teacher. And then there was a semester where everybody, again, a lot of rebellion. There was like he was harsh. So a lot of the students quit that semester. And then it ended up just being one student, me. I was the only one who didn't quit. And I didn't sign the student petitions. Let's get this teacher removed. I was like, no, this guy's amazing. And he's harsh because he's trying to teach us. And I was a single student one semester, and I felt I learned a lot because that semester we didn't need to be in class because I was his only student, right? Yeah. So we would just go to lunch and talk about photography, or we would walk around the campus and he would point lighting and see that point right there. Watch when a person walks down this corridor and watch when the light hits their hair. And then he would go, look, watch. And he'll go, look right there. And I'd be like, whoa, awesome. And he'd be like, that's where you want to shoot your portrait.
That's amazing.
Like, oh. Stuff like that. He was awesome.
That's amazing. You basically had him as your mentor for an entire,
he continued to be my mentor till I graduated, and he told me, don't do photography as a job. He said, he was so honest. I've never had a teacher this honest, but he was also complimentary. But he said, hey man, I started off not being so good, and I learned to be good at this job. He goes, you're starting off really good, and I'm telling you, don't do this job because you have options. Right? He was like, this isn't it. Like working at a newspaper isn't what you should be doing. Because, then he would take me with him, since I had this private semester. He would take me to I actually got to go to the Dodger games with him as his like assistant, but I would sign in under another newspaper name. It was completely fake, right? So he couldn't say I'm his intern. I would sign in as a photographer from a smaller newspaper, even though it wasn't true. Because like he said that no one would let me have a space in the baseball field well. It's like a photographer's well. He said they wouldn't let you in there if you said I'm an assistant. But if I said I work for this other newspaper and I just keep that lie up, I can stay in that.
That's amazing.
I can shoot pictures. So I got to sit among all the peers that I've been studying, all the guys, the photographers. I was like, oh my God, there's so-and-so. There's this guy. There's my teacher, right? We're all sitting there and we're just like playing it off like I'm shooting pictures for another newspaper when I was just shooting pictures for myself and stuff like that. I got to like tag along and see. And I saw a lot of those photographers sure cussed a lot. Like I got to see their conversations and they're just cussing the whole time. And I'm like, and he was like, yeah, man, this job he kept saying this job might not be, this isn't the best job. Like these people are like really bummed out. This isn't happy, like a lot of people are unhappy. So he was just like, don't do this. And so I didn't.
It's cool that you got to do that, have that experience like hands-on and see what was good and what was not so good about it.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Like who gets to do that? That was like this amazing opportunity, and I even got to borrow the lenses from like the Herald Examiner, the big lenses. I got to use those for free. Like he was just like, you could take this one. And I was like, all right.
Outside of like the newspaper work that you were doing, did you like what other type of photography did you like? Was it concert photography?
So
nature?
While I was learning all this stuff like sports photography, sports is the hardest part. I think photography. I mean, being good at everything is important, but sports is difficult because it's timing. So I was practicing that a lot. I was like, this is like the pinnacle is sports, like Sports Illustrated photography in the print magazine or National Geographic, right? Those two things, probably the best two like examples of photography out there on a, regular basis. And, I decided to take everything I learned and shoot punk rock bands, right? That's like indie rock. I was always at every show near the front area with my camera gear. I was really into it, but and I had like professional photography gear, but I would go to like super indie, all ages punk rock, like sweaty shows, but I would have like pro gear, like, cause I had it,
Nice. That's so cool. So like you said, you ended up at UCLA. What was that? I mean, but I think first you went to San Francisco for like a semester. So what was that trajectory to San Francisco, then back to UCLA?
I think I was giving up hope on getting into like, UCLA was the dream, right? I don't know why. I think because I grew up not far and it being sort of like the pinnacle of school in my area. San Francisco State was almost like a backup of a backup, and I got in and I was like, well, I guess I'm going to try this out. And I went, but then meanwhile, I applied to UCLA's anyway. And then after I moved up there, I got in to UCLA.
Nice.
And I was like, well, I guess I'm coming right back down after one semester. And it was, it was a good experience, but I didn't expect to get into UCLA. I thought I was going to be at San Francisco State till I graduated.
Right on. And your focus was East Asian Studies. So, like, what was your career goal with that? Like, what were you hoping to do with the degree in East Asian Studies?
No career goal at all. Really, no. I still didn't have a direction. Photography was still something I was doing, but East Asian Studies was the fastest way for me to graduate. Ideally, I wanted to be Asian American Studies. Like this month is, at least the month of May every year is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, right? But that's the American experience. And that's what I wanted to study. And it didn't exist as a major at that point, at least at UCLA. It didn't exist. So the closest thing I could take was East Asian studies. And it's completely different. It has nothing to do. One, well, has little to do with each other. Let's say that. But then soon after I graduated, maybe a few years later, it became a major. But I remember maybe counselors at UCLA saying, well, you can't do this because it doesn't exist. But also, it doesn't exist because there's no interest. And I was like, are you kidding me? It's a major that really matters. So just like, just crazy. I was just like, a counselor told me that there was no interest.
As you're expressing interest, like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It was literally like that.
Wow. Yeah. So, and it was while you were at UCLA that you ended up meeting who would ultimately become your business partner, Martin Wong. How did you first meet Martin, or did you know him before that?
Well, we were business partners and not quite, I don't know. I don't know if it's a business partner, but he was, we made Giant Robot magazine. He co-edited the magazine all the way to the end, from like maybe the technically the third issue to the end. But yeah, business wise, I was the 100% owner of Giant Robot. So okay. I started it, and I guess I ended it, unfortunately. I mean, as the magazine, right? The magazine title. But yeah, no, it was really fun to work with him. It was awesome.
How did you guys first meet? Was it something at school, or?
Well, I think ultimately, at least at that time, it's different now, but at that time in LA, if you went to see an indie rock concert, there was just like four, maybe, if there's 200 kids, there might be, you could count them on one hand, how many people that are Asian, much less like African American or Black, maybe one, right? Asians, maybe three, or something. And he was one of the other ones.
Okay.
Let's put it that way.
So you kept seeing him at all these concerts all the time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. For sure. So, like I said, there's just so few that I would run into him. And then eventually we, became friends too.
Okay. And so you graduated in 93, and right after that, you started working for Larry Flint Publications for, I think, a video game magazine. What were you doing for them? Like, what was that work like?
Larry Flint magazine, or Larry Flint's publishing empire, I guess. I worked at Video Games magazine, right? So you would think it was really glamorous or really dirty, one of the two. But ultimately, it was like a one-room office. It was literally just, it looked like someone's kind of like, desks, messy bedroom office kind of a thing. Nothing glamorous about it, for sure. Not really dirty either. It was kind of like ultimately really boring, but making the magazine or working on Video Games magazine was a lot of fun. I mean, who gets to play video games and write about them? And so I got to do that. Really great. I did that for like, a year or something like that. But yeah, I think seeing that was kind of a good thing, because I realized, oh, wow, this is how they make magazines. The staff being very tiny. It was like it was churning out. It was just like churning out a publication at any cost or any speed, just got to get done. Here's the deadlines. And it's just kind of, I just was like, oh, I thought a magazine would have a large staff. I thought it would need to be that way. And ultimately, no, it was a very small staff that would make a whole magazine. Just maybe it's cost cutting or cost efficient. That was interesting to me.
Why did you ultimately leave? You were only there for like a year, I guess.
Yeah, I was there for a short time. I think, it's a toxic environment, I would say. Like, if looking back, it was kind of a toxic environment. I mean, I see, perhaps unqualified people in certain roles type of a thing, and lots of, just toxic. There's some parts of it were great, but some parts of it were not. And I just like, I don't need to be yelled at so much. I don't think I even did anything wrong ever when I was there, like not once, but yeah, there was I saw a lot of yelling, and that's
really, for a video game magazine, people are just yelling at each other. That doesn't seem
not each other. One person yelling at everybody, maybe, but I would, yeah. Ultimately, I think that's kind of how it was. And I was like, oh, that's not how it should be. It doesn't need to be that way. But so I left thinking, oh, and then started Giant Robot as a zine soon after.
Yeah. So it was like right after that, you guys started, or you started with, and Martin doing code editing. Photocopied zine, 1994. How did that ultimately start? I mean, were you using some of the experience that you'd had in the magazine and just like, hey, we want to do this? But
I think it was a little of that, but more of seeing what else was out there in punk rock zines or Staple and Fold, right? And I thought I always enjoyed so many of them. They're so great. And so I always thought they were amazing. And then I would see magazines, all different kinds of magazines out there that I liked or some I didn't like. And I think when you just add it all up, it was like, okay, here's Giant Robot. It has probably the amount of text as any magazine, but it's going to be in the form of a zine, right? I think it was 64 pages or something, the first issue. So the idea was it's going to be very densely packed, lots to read, lots to check out. And it was at the time, $2. I mean, I don't know how that was affordable. Like zines are not $2, right, anymore. But at the time, I think they needed to be cheap. That was sort of the punk rock style. Every zine was low priced. And today, those same zines would be $10 plus,
sure.
Right? And it's not inflation; it's just the value put on it. I could see zines sometimes they're 16 pages and they're $10, and I'm thinking, wow! Like I made a 64-page zine with like our whole team, and it was only $2. Like that's wrong,
Well, it is that kind of punk rock ethos, I guess. How are you distributing them in the early days, like when it was being handmade?
Oh, well, that's an example of us, including Martin. We would go to anywhere that would take it, record stores. And a lot of places would say no. That's just how it was. But Tower Records took it.
Nice.
Eventually, Tower Records took it. And that was a big deal because that takes you national. And then I sent it to other review zines. Like there were zines that reviewed zines. And I sent it to them. And then we got great reviews right away. And that made a difference because people started ordering it. This is snail mail time. People started to order it right away. Like we had just tons of orders would happen. And not tons meaning, I don't know, 50. I mean, that's a lot at the time for a zine, right? That you'd think nobody's going to look at. But we did get it out there. Then eventually the distribution started to open up a little bit. And I think I had I don't know, I must have had a really great work ethic at that time because I just remember always working on it all the time and sending it to more and more places, seeking distribution from big distributors that handled magazines. I was like, here's Giant Robot. Get us in your distribution network. Like put us on the newsstand. And of course, their criticisms were, it's a zine. It's this and that. And once so the first thing I had to do is make it full size. Issue number 3 becomes full size. And then it gets a little more distribution into a network of shops around the country.
So it was only 2 issues that were actually the photocopied small. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Third issue was it third issue photocopied? I know it was printed like a color cover type of thing where the inside was newsprint.
Okay.
It's still low quality, but it was at least full size, which could stand on a news rack. Because a little zine cannot be on a news rack. It'll fall in, right?
Sure.
Full size one is so it can stand up on a news rack. And that's where things started rolling just a little bit. And with all things I do, it seems like I'm always thinking of a longer term type of, that's always my plan is to keep doing something. So we made small improvements along the way, but there was never one huge jump that just went, like something that becomes viral today is a huge lucky jump, right? There was nothing like that. Everything was a small incremental improvement over many years. It took years and years and years, like 5-6 years for it to look like a actual magazine, maybe.
Going in, did you ever expect, I mean, you said you were always thinking about the future. Did you ever expect what it would ultimately become and the impact that it would have on culture?
No, I think when I say future, I'm always thinking week by week or month by month. I'm never thinking 5 years down the line, it's going to look like this. I never, no. I'm only thinking just a little bit in front and, not too much. Yeah. Even to this day, I don't think anything is thinking 5 years in advance anymore. I don't do that or I never have. So, maybe that's why I'm still doing this the way I do things.
It works out. In the early days, you said you were spending all of your time on it. What were you doing for to pay the bills until it became sustainable?
So I lived at home. That's the difference. I lived at home with parents, I actually lived at home. So I did that for, I think while Giant Robot was going, I was pretty much at home for five years of it. The first 5 years or more, I was at home, maybe more. Because I actually left and then I actually moved out, then came back and still did Giant Robot. So it was, many years of it was at home. But with that comes major risks, because I think Martin at that time had a full-time job at McGraw-Hill. So, he was editing textbooks. Like, wow, he's a professional editor. That's amazing, right? A professional editor who has to rewrite chapters for professors who can't write, right? That's ultimately his job. It's uncredited, but I always thought that was really amazing. I'm like, professors are writing chapters for books, but then he would have to rewrite it because of their poor skill in writing, and they're the professors, but they're not writers. So I thought that was neat. But he ultimately was a great person to work with. But I didn't have a full-time job, so there was years of making zero money or negative income, as in fact, but me just being at home and going, okay, I'm now in my mid and then later 20s going, what is happening here? I'm going to be, I'm watching everyone I know, proceed in their careers wherever they're working, making more money, getting promotions, etc. And me, I'm the equivalent of I would be an equivalent of a brand new employee somewhere. If I had to go get a job at 30, I would be starting at entry level, right? Where everyone else I know is already 5, 6, 7 years working. My career would be just starting if I were to need to go get a job. So it was a big risk ultimately. What if Giant Robot didn't work out after 5 or 6 years? I would be, I would be close to 30 years old and looking for my first job, really, or second job, I guess, after Larry Flint. The 1 year stint there, I would be now looking for a job, for the first time.
I think it speaks a lot to your determination, though. I mean, the fact that it was negative income for so long, and it's just sticking with that and not feeling defeated. I think that speaks volumes.
I think I just really liked it no matter what. So even if it was not making money, I just really enjoyed it. So of course I helped at my mother's restaurant, as an employee. I was helping there as a job, but that's not, for me, that wasn't going to be my career, was to own a restaurant. I don't think I couldn't do it. Right. So I wasn't going to own a restaurant. So for me, it was, I was just sticking to my guns and just saying, well, you know what? I'm going to keep going with this, even if it's not really profitable, or is not profitable, because it wasn't for a long time. But even if it's not profitable, I'm just going to keep going and seeing what happens. But just imagine Giant Robot started in 94. So here I am, I'm 25. 5 years later, I'm 30, right? And at 30, Giant Robot was still not making money. It was definitely not. So yeah.
As Giant Robot started to graduate from zine to legit magazine, did your experience that 1 year at Larry Flint, did that help at all? Or did you still kind of have to learn everything from scratch?
I think it helped a little bit to understand workflow, maybe. But, the Larry Flint problem was that you would write something and then you send it off and it gets you don't see the editing that goes on, the copy editing. I don't see the layout, because the layout goes to a layout department who lays out maybe all of the magazines. You know what I'm saying? There's no single layout person for Video Games Magazine. It would go through this big factory machine. Once it gets out of your hands, next time you see it might be when that magazine's done, right? It goes through all these hands that aren't around. Because, a small magazine, we have our own layout person, was me for a long time, but there's no department that's invisible. It's, when you're doing it yourself, it's all through yourself. And, until, you see every step of it until the end. And maybe when you're making a magazine at Larry Flint, you don't see everything to the end.
Okay. So it was all on the job training.
Oh yeah, for sure. Cause I had to learn all the software and everything. And I knew nothing when I started except for maybe a little bit of Word, and that was really it. So ultimately, no.
In 2011 is when the last issue was published, right? So I guess why did you
I think the end of 2010, beginning of 2011 type of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. What brought it to an end? Was it circumstances, or was it some personal decision that, hey, I don't really want to do this anymore?
Oh, no. I mean, I think, it's starting to boil because the magazine industry in general was starting to go downhill because, blogs, and I think blogs were big then. So the internet was taking off, of course. Even, it was already there, but I think it was taking off a lot more in terms of information out there. And I think magazines in general started to decline right at that point. And that was the exact time when I think there was a lot of people saying, hey, our magazine's going to be dead. Like our book's going to be dead was also another kind of like a stream of conversation, was that books are dying, magazines are dying, print is dead was kind of what was being said. So you could see that it was declining though. Every issue, Giant Robot was declining in circulation. Advertising revenue was going down. Everything was kind of going down. Plus we were still sort of in that bad 2007, 2008, the whole like economic collapse, right? It was all happening at the same time. And I think that collapse made everybody learn a lot of different lessons, but part of it was really just saving money, and magazines is probably one of the first things that you just don't need anymore.
Right.
And when you think, oh, there's all this stuff on the internet, I don't need magazines. And then at the same time, I think the advertising was kind of slowing down because some were looking toward the internet, some were looking toward, or it was still in that poor time of, I don't know, economic collapse. So advertising dollars is also the first thing that goes, right? Advertising goes down and luxury like magazines go out of style for people. So I think that was one of those things where it wasn't coming back, even though the economy started to improve a little. I think that everyone's habits had changed by that time. And it was either, there's a couple of options for survival, I thought, but it didn't seem like that was going to happen. So the best thing to do was just shut down.
Do you miss the publishing business at all?
A little bit. But, like I always think, how would a magazine survive today? Because there are new magazines and some of them are great. Part of it is, the magazines now can't be $4.95, right? Magazines have to be like $10, $12, or even $20, right? You can't make magazines. Well, you could do it 6 times a year, maybe, if you have an audience. But part of it is finding your niche audience that's hardcore and serving them. And if it's $20 an issue, they would pay it. I'd pay $20 for a magazine I really liked. That's no problem at all. But I think that's it. Finding 1,000 people that really like Giant Robot that would pay $20 an issue. Now you're in business, right? You're in business. So I think that was the way to survive. But we were a $4.95 magazine, and $4.95 carved up by distribution. Oh man. And also the distribution business is really bad. Like today, if you were making a magazine, don't use a distributor. That was a lesson learned. No, man, it's terrible. It's all against the publisher. Every single thing is against the publisher of making money. Like it was for them to make money. So today I would just cut out the distributor, self-distribute, charge $20 an issue, and keep all $20. Like I think you would keep, less than 25% of your, like the distributor carves up half.
Jeez. Or
they were doing a lot of shady things. Like the distributors are very shady. It's very, serves them right if they're all out of business, because I think magazine distributors were absolutely terrible. That's a horrible business. And I think it was evil on their part. And it really was, in my opinion. And, everything was stacked against a publisher. So making a magazine today, you're best off being indie, doing it yourself from beginning to end. And I think you'll actually survive. You can make it. You can make a career of this. But once you trust a distributor to do it and think, oh, they're just going to make it easier for me, they're out there just carving your dollar up and taking it. So
that's a good perspective to have. So about midway through your career as a publisher, you opened the first of what ended up being several Giant Robot brick and mortar stores, right? But I believe your venture into retail started even before that. Didn't you open an online store in the late 90s, even before the physical store opened?
Maybe 97 or something. GiantRobot.com. We were doing e-commerce for sure. Yeah, we were doing e-commerce, and It was running out of a garage. Literally, that our magazine office garage was happening there.
The early days of e-commerce. What prompted that transition from publishing into retail? Like that's a different.
I was doing both. Oh yeah, this is the weird part is, I noticed that making a magazine and writing about things that I really loved, which was kind of part of Giant Robot, was I would say we, because Martin too did this. We wrote about what we loved. That was really important, right? That's like, I would say, I mean, that's what makes the magazine the magazine, right? Is writing about what you really are really passionate about. When you're writing about things that you don't care about, that's when it's a job and really not something that you can be passionate about. It's like, that's not even real, right? So Giant Robot was very real. It was our passion. And I realized that after writing about certain things, people out there would want to, they would capitalize off of it. Like some people who advertised in Giant Robot would ask, what are you writing about? And we would say, oh, here's some topics. And then they would put those topics into their ads and say, oh, we're selling this DVD by this director. And we would be interviewing that director. They knew ahead of time. Oh. So they would feature those things. And I'm like, oh, they're profiting off of everything we're writing about. So eventually I was like, okay, so if we write about this thing, this person, whatnot, interviewing a person or talking about an object or something we really liked, I was like thinking, well, what if I got 10 of them to offer to the readers, just 10 pieces? And over time, I realized, oh, okay, there are people that want things, so I can get things that are very limited edition because we wanted it for ourselves, just one. And then I was thinking, well, there's at least 10 people or 20 or 100 who might want that as well. But it took me a long time to realize that. And once I started to realize that, I started to get those things, store them, and then we can offer them for sale and people would buy them little by little. And eventually that became a thing where I was like, okay, this is working. Let's continue. We'll continue doing it this way. So I think the idea was not to be the person that writes about things that you have to sell, but it was about still finding new things that we were passionate about and keeping that up and being more, I would say, I mean, we were very honest about that stuff because I think that you can easily get corrupted by that too and say, look how great this shitty movie is, right? It's a really bad object or bad product. And we could say how great it is to sell it, but no, it never did that. It was always about something I thought, if I recall, it was always about something that I really liked. We were very passionate about. And I think that was kind of what made it more real and authentic, is because it was literally that. So if you were really into what we were into, we had those objects.
I think that's probably why it resonates with so many people, because they see the authenticity of that. I think that immediately turns people off when they think it's just a facade,
Yeah, I think it was pretty real. I mean, thinking back about those things that we had, and I was like, wow, this is a super limited thing. This director gave us, 50 of this special limited edition book they made in Asia and sent us these 50 copies that I paid for, but you couldn't get them outside of him, right? Or her, the director, things like that. I was getting really exclusive things and was the only one in America getting them, type of a thing. So
nice.
I think that's kind of part of it, was the passion. It was as passionate, as much passion it was to write about them. I think the same passion was to be able to offer them to other people who might have had that passion too. It was also like hustling to get them, because you can also just, do an interview and say, okay, thank you, goodbye, right? Forever. And for me, it was more like, okay, thank you, but can I get some of those? and really fight for that. And just say, hey, this will be really great to have. And you have fans here. And if they're in Asia, they would be like, really? I have fans there? I'm like, yes. And they would want this badly. And this would be an awesome thing to have out in America. Right. And sure enough.
That's really cool. So in 2001, you opened your first physical location. What prompted the move from online retail to brick and mortar? Was it just a size problem?
Yeah, it was a volume problem. Having too many things in our magazine office, taking up too much space. Literally. And I think that was kind of the problem. And it was either find a storage facility or actually have a brick and mortar store. And sometimes, the prices of rent are different, but at the same time, it was like, well, we could pay rent here or have a store that would possibly profit. And I think opening the store was pretty much, it just got lucky. Like the first location of the store, which is still there today, was complete luck. I was looking around and the for lease sign came up. I was the first person to ask because I was keeping an eye out. Sure enough, I was able to get it, but it was, finding that for lease sign was key. Yeah. And it was just serendipitous. Everything kind of worked out in so many positive ways, but it was very serendipitous that it was there at that location.
Well, I think the location is also rather notable because it's on Sawtell, the neighborhood where you grew up, or the street where your parents met. Your grandmother lived 5 blocks away, I believe. So help me understand that the choice of going with that location, was it to kind of stay connected with your roots and pay homage to where you grew up?
No, none of those things were at first in my mind. I think first in my mind was finding a location that was accessible. That street was not popular at that time. In 2001, the street was not what it is today. Today, it's a real destination. If you're in LA, I would say a lot of people in LA know about this location. The block is hot, like on a Friday. There's a ton of people there. But when I started, it was dead. It was dead. So I was thinking, God, I'm going to open a store in this dead area. Kind of, it's relatively dead, and I'm going to open the store. There's no other store like it. It's very sleepy. So I was thinking, well, part of it is it's close. The rent was, I thought, affordable, although still a stretch. And it was just one of those things where, no, I was just thinking more in terms of trying to do something and not really think about the location and what it means. All the definitions luckily come later. It's sort of like an artist, right? If they're young, maybe they make a painting and don't know why, but then maybe 10 years down the line, they're like, I know why I paint this now, right? Yeah. Because I grew up this way, and there's, the themes in the paintings resonate with my life from when I was a child to now. It's like that with a store too. I don't know why I picked it. I just was like, oh, here's a spot, kind of affordable, but really not, still a stretch. And then all the definitions and serendipitous things started to appear little by little over time. And then you have a definition. Oh yeah, I grew up here, and this is why I picked it. But it's at the time now, I just picked it. It was close, So yeah, I picked it because it was close and because I was living close by, right? But but in my soul, in that area being like a big part of my life, I didn't think about those things. That's like now where I'm like, wow, like I'm so thankful I'm there,
It tells a great story.
For sure.
I guess as you started to dip, first start getting involved in retail, dipping your toe into physical storefront locations, what were some of the challenges that you encountered? Having been pretty much completely in the publishing industry, now moving into retail, like those are very different atmospheres, very different challenges. How did that adjustment happen?
I think that's a fun question because what happened was, I think what really made me want to do this was that I took a trip to New York in 2000 maybe, or was it 99 or 2000? And I went to New York. I don't even remember why. Like I just went. And I don't think there was a reason. If I think about it, I have no idea, but I was just exploring, and I just spent days just exploring the area. I don't know why. It's so weird. I was by myself too. So I was just exploring the area, and I was walking around everywhere. And I stumbled across like some cool stores on the Lower East Side. And those are like historical stores now, and they're gone. But like A-Life, I forgot the one that Futura owned. I forgot the name of that store. But it just exploring the area, and A-Life was amazing. Like I looked at it, I was like, this is a rad store. And I was like thinking, I've been to Japan meanwhile, so I've seen cool shops out there, but that store reminded me of like Japan, closest thing I've seen. And I think that's what, and then of course I went to another store called Zaka, Zakka. It was like a Japanese design store in New York. And I remember going there, and the owner, his name is Toshiki. I think he's still like doing things, but he moved back to Japan. He told me you should open a shop. And I was like, really? And he said I should open he called it a studio, but I mean, he meant shop. And, but then as soon as he said that, things clicked. I was like, oh, I'm supposed to open a store. He said that, and I wasn't thinking about opening a store. So then I think once that happened, it planted a seed in my mind that I should be opening a store eventually. But I think that's what kind of did it. And ironically, David Horvath from Ugly Dolls, the creator of Ugly Dolls, he was there at the same time at the same stores. Oh, wow. Maybe weeks apart. He met the same people, and he met the people there, And of course they rejected him. And when I went there, nothing was for sale. Like, if I wanted something, it was, oh, it's not for sale. Like everything was not for sale. I'm like, whoa, that's weird, right? Like nothing was for sale. And he had the same experience, that he loved the store. And it was so influential for me and influential for David from Ugly Dolls, but maybe negatively influential for me and him too, because they shoot him out because he was like wanting to take pictures of his Ugly Doll thing or something like that. You know, like they told him no. And they told me, no, nothing's for sale. So we had the same experience. And then we're like, well, I'm going to open a store, but I think I'm going to make everything for sale. And it's going to look as cool as that, but it's going to be for sale. And then David was like thinking, well, I'm going to make something that's accessible, you know, that's going to be for everybody, because this place won't let me do things there. So I'm going to do something that makes it accessible. Then I met David in LA because he's from LA. This is after he graduated. And that's where, like, you know, he brought an Ugly Doll. And I was like, this is a good match, man. And we didn't even know about this New York similarity that we had. And it turns out, well, he grew up in the area too, and, you know, close by. We went to the same video game arcades as a kid, although maybe I'm a year or two older, and just things like that. It was just like really serendipitous that then Ugly Doll was born, you know, at our store, really. And at the same time, you know, our store went in our direction. So it was just interesting that there was more than one person that had the same experience that pushed us into doing something. So sometimes it's negative things that really push you, you know?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's a long story there.
No, but it's interesting how it kind of became a reaction to some of the bad aspects of these New York stores that you were seeing.
Yeah, I mean, and the stores are beautiful, like amazing. Like going there, I was like, wow, look at this. Like, look how beautiful this is and how great. And then I was like, oh, but nothing's for sale. Like they have all these cool things, but nothing was for sale. I was like, what? Like, am I not good enough to buy it? Or are they really not for sale? And how are you guys making money? You know, like question mark. I don't know. So I think that's what kind of pushed me into a direction. And I realized, oh, I'm not a cool kid like those guys are, whatever they are, right? I'm not one of those cool kids. So, you know, that's kind of how I saw it. I was like, oh, I'm the outsider still. I'm still the outsider. I'm still the indie punk rock guy that's like on the outskirts and still like, you know, that's how I felt. And I was like, oh, I don't understand their whole vibe, you know? So I was like, I'm going to make something for all of the rest of us, which is kind of what Giant Robot Magazine was, right? It was the zine that was for like outsiders of all things. In my opinion, it was sort of an outsider thing that became bigger. You know, I think there's more outsiders than there are insiders.
For sure.
Right? Who knew? Yeah. I didn't know that, right? I was thinking, oh, we're the small community. And I realized, no, we're the majority.
Yeah.
Right? There's more outsiders, more awkward people than there are like cool hipsters, whatever you want to call it, you know?
100%.
That's actually a small group. I didn't realize that. I thought that was massive. And I thought it was a small you know, so there's tons of people just like me out there, all over the country. And I think that's kind of what makes the magazine work. And then ultimately maybe the stores kind of like attracted that too. Because I was kind of thinking, oh, I want to be as cool as those guys. And I realized, you know what? I don't want to be as cool as those guys. I want to just do it on my own terms. And, you know, instead of having their boutique, I don't know, plush doll stuff that was expensive, I was like, well, Ugly Dolls were like $30, you know? It was like this. It was like the contrary. Everything was the opposite of what I was kind of like looking at when I was going to those stores. I was like, oh, I could do it the opposite, still look good, but do it the opposite way in some ways. And, you know, we don't have to be, we could be friendly. You know what I'm saying? We don't have to be like, walk in and cast a cooler than thou vibe. We can actually be like, hey, dude, you know, like be totally friendly and happy. And we were, so.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So at some point you started also bringing art into the store as well to show art, even before you opened GR2.
Oh yeah.
Was that always part of the plan, or was it something that sort of organically developed as you were going?
All organic. Didn't know. I think we did an art show with a woman named Ayamaguchi, who's blown up now. She's like a big artist. But we did a show with her. But I think that it was just because they didn't have really, you know, opportunities in America. So we were like, well, we could do one in the store. And then we did Cozy and Dan. We worked with Cozy and Dan, kind of well-known artists now. And we didn't understand what's an art show, you know? And ultimately, no, like we were doing everything probably the wrong way. And we made an art show happen in our space that wasn't a really great space for art, but good enough. But we didn't quite understand, like, what is this, you know, like, how's this working? And then there were other people interested in art, right? I mean, not a huge audience in was it 2002 or whatever it was, 2001, 2002. Not a huge audience for it, but there was an audience. And that was good to know. Like, it was just kind of like it was small, but really awesome. And no, it's kind of how it got going.
And did that end up growing enough in the next 2 years to just, I mean, is that why the GR2 became its own space? Because you started to get enough demand to kind of justify a completely dedicated space to it?
I don't think it was the demand. I think it was more that I kept seeing artists out there who I thought whose work was so great but had no outlet, and that includes a guy like David Cho was a good example. He didn't have an outlet for art at all. He was showing his art was at an ice cream store for a long time on Melrose, right? So his first shows were at an ice cream store because there was no space for him to do this at.
Wow.
And when I started seeing more and more artists. Death P. Sun was an artist who is an artist all these guys are still really like, and all these people, they didn't have spaces for their art at all. There was nowhere for them to show. So, and this is still kind of early art. I still call it an early art days in 2003 and 2002, 2003. So we opened in 2003. I feel like it was a February, but I can't remember anymore. And David Cho was our first show, and it was packed. And
Nice.
This is before gallery hopping was a thing, right? There was, like, on a given Saturday, people go to like many galleries to see art, right? All over LA. LA's got a bunch. So, but at that time, no. If there was an art show at Giant Robot, people would come and stay. And it was like the thing to do and hang out at. So we can get, I mean, there'd be hundreds of people just hanging out all night. Like, there was no like, oh, we got to leave to go to this other art show. No, there was no other art show. This was it. Most of the time. So the first show, David Cho's art show, and we had hundreds of people there. I mean, not thousands, but hundreds. And they were hanging out the whole time. And it was like this amazing night, right? And I think the second show was Cozy and Dan. Same thing. Amazing night. Tons of people. Death P. Sun was the third show. So like in a row, I'm working with artists who I still like love and admire today, and who've all like grown up and have become great artists, right? Or are doing really well. And those are my first three shows. And it kept going, right? There were more shows after that, right? Like, just kept going.
No, it's incredible. I mean, because you have shown many notable figures over the years, from David to James Jean, Audrey, Esau, in many of your group shows.
Sure.
So
we've done solo shows with Barry McGee. Done that. Yeah, I don't know, just a bunch.
and many of those, like you said, with especially with like David Cho, ended up becoming complete like a rock, art rock stars.
Yeah.
Right. And as his career progressed, I guess, who are some of like the newer artists today that you're excited about personally?
Oh, I mean, some are already like really great. Like Felicia Chow is one of them. I like working awesome. With. Yeah. Rain Sito. I like Rain. There's a whole bunch. Maggie Chang, who currently has a show, is really great. Love working with her. I mean, just to drop a few names, but there's so many that I really like working with, and I try to work with them as much as I can. It's really great. So yeah. I'm blessed that way.
Well, you definitely have a knack of like finding talented artists. I think that's one of the things that has been a constant throughout your career. I think you showed Takashi Murakami on the magazine before he got really big.
Yoshitomo Nara as well. But and I showed Mike Lee. I think we did 2 solo shows with Mike Lee, I think, and he's now like a big artist. So, sure. But yeah, I don't really. I mean, I guess I don't think too much about artists who are big versus artists who are small.
Makes sense.
I just think of more in terms of art that I like, that I enjoy looking at, and people I like working with. I think is kind of the key thing. If I don't like working with them, then that's a bigger problem. But I think it has to do with that more than anything else. It's our personalities and interests kind of melding a little bit. That's what makes a better show for me, and makes me want to keep going and doing more with them.
Okay, and one of the shows that you've kind of become quite well known for over the years is the annual Post-it Note show, which I absolutely love. Even though I've never actually managed to make it out to LA to attend one, I just love the spirit of it and kind of what the show represents.
Yeah.
And like for those unfamiliar, like this is the show that you do every year where like hundreds of artists will make art on literal Post-it notes, and you'll have wall-to-wall like grid of Post-it notes.
I think normal years can range from like 2,700 to 3,300 Post-it notes, about that many. That's a lot, man.
It's crazy. What's so cool about that, though, is that you have artists from every level of experience and fame, but they're still it's like super affordable, approachable. Like,
that's $25. $25. Yeah. Even a James Jean Post-it will be $25. Audrey does it. Audrey Kawasaki does it. Some notable figures, but I think the notable figures, I mean, they're great, but I always get excited to see the ones who are brand new, like the new artists who are young and they're trying to put their best foot forward. You know, like at this moment, if James Jean just wrote a signature on a Post-it note, it could sell for $25, literally.
Right,
but
sure.
you know what I mean? Literally. But I think, you know, the young artists out there are just trying to make their way, and they're putting their all in a 3 by 3 inch by 3 inch piece of paper. And I love seeing that too. So I think both of those together make it really interesting. And I think ultimately, like, I still look at it this way, that it's that the larger artists who get to be more well known are ultimately helping the new artist by lending their effort, their name, and reputations to a Post-it note show for selling their work for only $25. But they inadvertently are actually helping the art scene by doing that, and which then brings people in and finding new artists, right? Yeah. So in a way, like, whether the artists realize it or not, they're giving back to the world that kind of helped make them. And I don't know if they look at it that way, but that's how I see it. It's that they're actually giving back. So by them participating actually brings new artists up. And that's kind of really important, because without new artists in this scene, I guess you would say, it won't really, I mean, it won't be sustainable technically. Like, it's growing because the bigger artists are helping the newer artists, even if they don't know they're doing it. And I see it that way. So a lot of shows I have can be riskier with new people because I work with some artists that are well known, right? Like, they help us do well or enough and to take a risk on having a show that sells zero, right? If a show sells zero, many times you're going to be out of business. But if I have a show with somebody and, you know, I can sell their work, you know, that's like actually giving me an opportunity, and I feel more comfortable taking risks on a total unknown person. And, you know what I mean? Like, some galleries can't do that. They're going to have to always hit home runs over and over and over and over. For me, I'm willing to take a risk on a brand new person because, you know, a famous person like James Jean has supported us so well with so many things, right? You know, selling art or selling his books and signing his stuff. He's actually giving back to a brand new artist that he doesn't even know, because he's been doing that for us. And, you know, because I'm kind of like putting that risk into a brand new artist and if, like I said, if they sell zero, it's okay, because I've had the support of some of these bigger artists. You know what I'm saying? That's how I do it.
I love that about the Post-it note show. I mean, I think that is one show that illustrates what you're talking about in kind of a very concentrated way, because these larger names will come in, or, you know, people come in the door because they see, oh, well, there's something by James Dean, there's something by Audrey, but then they could fall in love with this other artist that they've never seen before and get exposed to for the first time, you know?
That is the idea. Like, Gary Baseman is another one, right? He does a lot. Matt Groening, I don't know, the Simpsons creator, does it. I mean, they don't realize, I don't think they even think about it this way, but they're all giving back to their community and raising new artists by participating. And not just the Post-it show, but by other group shows that we do. Like, I can afford to then, again, take risks on a brand new person, you know, and a brand new person may have like no Instagram followers. Like, it could be that low, right? Like that tiny of a person in terms of art career. But, you know, I can afford to take that risk. Whereas, you know, like, probably some places won't ever do that. It's just money, 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 right? Like, you know, good seller all year long, which is amazing, right? For me, I'm willing to take many shows that are just like, okay, this one might not do well, but it's okay. Like, I got to give these, you know, I want to give a new kid a shot, you know?
I love that. I love that perspective and the way that you really kind of strive to lift people up, you know?
Oh, it's sustainable. I think that's how do you make this whole scene sustainable, is to keep finding new people and giving them chances and letting them grow. And then, you know, it's just like, you need new people or else it's not going to work. And if I only work with like artists that are a certain fame, that means their work's probably kind of pricey. So that's going to eliminate new collectors, right? A new collector will be like, dude, I can't afford anything here. Whereas, it's awesome when a new collector can come and go, my first piece of art and it's $100, right? And it's like, yeah, it's affordable, $100. I can do this. And it's a new artist, and I think that's kind of, it might not be enough for us to pay rent that month, but maybe the previous month or the two before that, I did well enough that kind of supports this. And that's kind of the idea. It's just, it's kind of being sustainable in this kind of, I don't even know how to describe my level of where art is. Like, sometimes I think this is like almost like a gallery that's like a beginner sometimes, but then at times I work with artists that are really big, that are much bigger than the space that I'm offering. But again, it's being sustainable back to the scene. And I think if artists understand that a little bit, then, it works out.
No, I really love that. Yeah. So I want to change gears a little bit and talk to you about how you and Giant Robot have reacted to what's happened over the last year with COVID. Because obviously a big part of the gallery experience is that in person, being able to see the brushstrokes, being able to see the art up close and personal. So I guess, how did you adjust to the lockdowns and the quarantines and a lot of the stuff that effectively caused businesses to close for a long time, right?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It was, I would say I at least reacted, I don't know. I would say I went into overdrive and worked very hard, harder than ever. I think the idea was to not be defeated by COVID, right? And the lack of people, and finding ways to continue doing, whatever we were doing, business. I guess you want to call it business. So we didn't stop art shows at the gallery. We never stopped once. We did every art show that we wanted to do. We put art on the walls, even if no one was seeing it. Whereas I noticed some galleries didn't do that. They were conducting their art shows online, but the art was just sitting in their boxes. You know what I mean? Whereas I hung it every show as if there's going to be people there. And I took pictures as if, we were a gallery, right? Which we are. So, no, we just kind of kept going and didn't stop. And I think that but that's important too, because it helped all the artists too make money when maybe it was harder to make money. I was like, nope, we're not going to stop. We're going to try to sell your work, and hopefully you can pay your bills with us selling some of your work. And we hustled and did that. And then even did more. We did more art shows at our regular shop. The Giant Robot store also has their own art shows now. And we stepped those up from being 4 times a year or even 3 times a year to almost one a month. Like, we were just thinking, because there's levels of artists. Some artists are even I don't want to say smaller than type of thing, but younger artists who, maybe we're not even showing them at the gallery, the GR2 gallery, but we're putting them in the GR store galleries, and they're getting, we're putting them in shows every month. And we're doing that too. So running 2 shows kind of at the same time. And we did that through the whole pandemic and are continuing to do that. But I think part of it was to, also help ourselves, but help out artists too, because now we have an outlet for so many artists that actually still don't have an outlet, right? They're maybe not well known. I mean, some are, but some are not well known enough, or they're newer, or maybe in a different genre than a lot of galleries want to show. And we're able to, we're trying to show them. So, and it's done okay. I think we're in the right area for it. Again, there's that whole thing of people, getting more into baking, planting plants, right? Because you're at home more, right? And you're now spending so much time at home that you're looking at your walls going, these walls sure would look better with art on it.
Right.
And maybe our art is in the right price point of everything. Like, it's hard to buy if you're super wealthy, sure. But if you're medium or whatever, even less than medium, I mean, whatever medium income is, maybe our art is in the right, ballpark, in terms of affordability. And maybe there's that, we have a range. So I think that helps. But if we were some of these giant galleries where the art starts at $10,000, it's possible that maybe you can't sell that sight unseen.
Right.
Because our art was being bought sight unseen. Like, we were doing that and really pushing that, like, sight in person. You could see it online. But I think, and there's also maybe a trust factor that we've been around for a little while. So you can trust, okay, these guys will show art that I probably will like, and it will look good in person when I receive it as it does on the, I think there might be a little bit of trust there. So I'm thankful of that too.
You've also made live streams a big part of your program in I guess in response to COVID. Is that something that you think you'll continue to do? Is that like a permanent part of your business now, even once you start open back up widely?
I think so. Yeah. The live streams are important. We've done live streams for every art show, sometimes two. Maybe we even interview an artist or something like that, and try to make it as accessible as it used to be. And, if an artist can't come because of COVID, well, we'll put them on the live stream, maybe once, maybe even twice to, get people to really feel comfortable with them, which then leads you to go, oh, wow, this person's so cool. And I like their story as to why they're doing the art. So maybe I actually like their art more, right? It just understanding the backstory sometimes is the difference to make people understand the work and enjoy it more. It resonates, right? So I think that was kind of important to do. And I think that's part of Giant Robot. And, thankfully making a magazine, interviewing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of subjects maybe gives me a little bit of an advantage there, that I can interview an artist maybe better than the next person.
Right.
Maybe. I'm not sure, but maybe, right? Like I have that experience that I can interview them pretty well on the spot, because most of my interviews I did for the magazine, I hate to say, was with no preparation.
Wow.
I would just walk in and do the interview. I mean, I might read some stuff, but I never wrote any questions out, or even not much. And I would just go ahead and run the interview that way. And oftentimes zero, like I would know what they did, but not much.
So I find that extremely impressive. That almost causes me a little bit of anxiety just thinking of
For me, it's all about, so for me, the interviews and most things I do, it's all about the first question, right? I need question number one. If I don't have question number one, that's a big problem. That's me climbing uphill to get to question number one. If I have a good question number one, everything is downhill. Like it's a really smooth ride. But if I don't, and I have a rocky first question, I'm climbing till I can get to that point to then get smooth. So I know that. So I need to make sure I have a good first question, whatever it is. And it has to resonate and feel good with the subject, right? Like that first question has to be something that they go, oh, I see where we're going. This is nice, like this feels really good. I like this. So I have to establish that first. And if I can do that, then usually I'm fine. So
I admire that. That's impressive.
It was a long time doing it, but you're doing good too, in my opinion.
I appreciate that.
But better than most. I think so. But I think that's part of how I operate, and doing those interviews kind of are like that. And we live stream also the store ones, and I have Cassia Lupo. She works at the other store or at the Giant Robot store, and curates the shows there. And these are things that I've tried to help her learn and get better at. And she doesn't have that experience, so it's a little different. She might prepare a little different, but we talk that through, and she improved a lot. So, so she does the live streams there, and I want her to take a little bit of control of that, and just not have me on everything. Right? It's just too much. But yeah.
No, I like that. Another thing that's sort of became a part of your business since COVID was Pop Shop Live. I see that in your feed a lot, so I wanted to ask you about that.
No,
what was?
I'm sorry about that.
No. I'm just curious because I was brand new to even what it is.
Yeah,
so I guess help me understand. Is that like a live stream where you can sell things via live stream?
I think first, I mean, if you see that on my feeds and stuff, I kind of had I guess somewhere during COVID, during this COVID time, I really started to not like social media. I used to be really into social media and posting what I'm doing and posting opinions and, trying to help people out by writing longer things in Facebook or whatever it was. And during this time, I think I'm really adverse to that. And I've become more private than ever. So everything I'm posting is work related. So you might see the Pop Shop thing more because I'm not hiding it with tons of other things. Like, here's the dinner I cooked. Look at how good I've really stopped doing all that kind of stuff for right now. Anyway, I haven't, I just took such a negative reaction to like so much social media right now, or at least the trolls. I don't know. I just decided I had enough. So you might see it more, but Pop Shop is an app. It started off with iPhone only, iOS, and now it's on everything, including desktops. And it's an app where I'm basically talking and showing products, and you can buy them on the app. And basically, and it shows up on the app, and you could actually just push your screen and buy it. It's really easy. So I've been doing that since August until now, and I'm still doing it twice a week. And I think for a while on there, at least, I was streaming for 8 hours at a time, sometimes more.
Oh, wow.
So it's an all-day stream. I start at 4 p.m. and I go till midnight. And I still do that sometimes. I did 4 to 11 last Thursday. So, I'm still doing these long hours. And I'm talking, like sometimes there's no sales. So in a way, that is my social media to some extent, is that I'm just talking about news things. It's like a long podcast. I might have guests. I might not have guests. And I'm just me talking for 8 hours and showing products. So, there's times of me showing products, which is like part of the job. But then sometimes it's 2 hours of me talking about life, and, that's part of it. And maybe that's why, like, that's my social media in a way. Like, I'm not posting things, but I am putting it all there.
Do you feel like it also kind of fills in the gap that you would normally have had running the store? Like talking to people, coming in the store and just having conversations with people?
Sure. There is that too. And they are coming into the store just virtual, right?
Sure.
Because I'm in the store when I'm podcasting and I'm showing products, and I'm having conversations with people because there's a chat in there. And they might chat and say things, and then I'll respond to that, and it becomes a longer story, and I'll tell a story about it, about what it might be, and sort of like that.
Oh, it's really cool. What's the reception been like?
Really good, I guess. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I still do it. I have nothing to complain about. It's been fun. For the most part, I think the audience there really understands how it all works and and I think maybe I meld well with this app because it seems like, I'm still doing it for 8 hours at a time and enjoying it. And I get a lot of praise for it. And the customers are especially great, like really good customers. Nicer than our online customers. There's a specifically really great audience, and they follow you sort of, right? So I guess I could say these are like part of my audience. I could say that, I guess, part of the community, the Giant Robot community. But this is a community that for the most part didn't exist before. So this is a new community, whereas, there's people that buy off our website. There's people that might listen to the Robot and the Bear podcast I do with Luke Chu, right? There's these art fans, right? There's all these different pockets, but this Pop Shop one is its own, right? It's a brand new kind of a brand new community. Like some of these folks never heard of Giant Robot before before Pop Shop. And now they're now they tune in, and it's been really great, especially during COVID, where you couldn't go out and stores were really shut. This was like a really great thing to reach out to people. And now that it's like opening up more, it's like there's just question marks. Like, is this going to be sustainable? Is this going to keep going? Is this going to work out? Or is this because I think some stores that are doing Pop Shop, one or two at least. One of them, I think they closed. Like all locations are physically closed. They're only doing Pop Shop.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So they're like, well, why pay rent and why do it that way when I could just do it on this app? And, and just think like if you have a store that's small, how many people can be inside? Like 4, 5, 6. But then Pop Shop, you might have 50 or 100 people watching all at once, wanting to shop at the same time.
Wow.
I can't fit 50 people in my store, right? To buy. This is like a very, like a comparative, it sounds really great in terms of what the potentials are.
No, that's awesome. And so you mentioned Robot and the Bear, and I wanted to dive into that a little bit before we talk about what you have coming up. That I've enjoyed that podcast. And so you're not brand new to podcasts. This is not your first podcast. You've been doing them for a bit. I guess first of all, it's a fantastic title. I absolutely love the name. But how did you guys get started? Like what started the podcast?
So before I get into that one, I did another one called The Jew and the Lotus.
I saw that, yeah, with Daniel Rolnick, right? So
Daniel Rolnick and I started this, and I don't know where, so I learned a lesson that iTunes and all of the streaming places, you need to have your podcast online somewhere. Because I thought once I uploaded them, I thought they would upload it to their own server. So I think I stopped one thing, not knowing, like it was like one of the other websites. And I was like, well, we're just going to stop this because it's all available. I realized, it cut off the podcast everywhere. right? I didn't know that. I thought it would upload once I uploaded it to our own blog or wherever it was that then feeds to iTunes. I thought iTunes would then grab it from us and it would live there. Wrong. Didn't know. So yeah, no. And then, so I was wrong. So those things are, I have them backed up somewhere. I just haven't re-uploaded them all. But, yeah, I was doing that. It was that was Jew and the Lotus, him being the Jew and me being the Lotus. It was like this joke name. And, it was fun because we talked about art a lot because Daniel Rolnick was also a curator and had his own gallery and I had my own, but they were very different. But at the same time, we had similarities. So, we would talk about religion and then art and then back to religion, but religion from a very clueless perspective because I don't know much about, Judaism or anything. I don't know it very, very little. And I know about Buddhism. So we'd have funny conversations and him being like, me being at the time in my 40s, 40 maybe. I don't remember how old I was already, but yeah, I was like double his age. So, he was showing me how, what was that? The dating app? Tinder. He was showing me, because we were doing video podcasts, so both, but he was showing me how Tinder worked on the stream, or on person. I'd be like, I don't know what Tinder, like I've never seen it. And he was on Tinder. So I got to look at and I was like, wow, this is amazing, right? It's a catalog of human beings, like what? So I actually didn't know, like I heard of it, but I didn't know what it looked like. So things like that. He was showing me like things that a millennial will do. I think he's a millennial. And then, we always had this kind of funny banter between, like I'm a Gen X guy. He's a millennial. So we would have this great, banter back and forth. And then, eventually he moved away, closed his gallery and moved away. We did our podcast for a while, then stopped and then, started up with Luke Chu, who, that started because, Luke Chu was a guy who for a while lived close by to the gallery. He would come in, there's benches there. He would sit down. We would talk for hours and hours and hours. I mean, we were just talking about art and life and we still do. Sometimes we're like, we're going to podcast Tuesday. He'll come on a Sunday, hang out. We talk so much that we're like, okay, we're not going to podcast Tuesday. We just did our podcast and didn't record it, So, we started doing our podcast. He's the bear, I'm the robot. So Robot and the Bear podcast. And sometimes it's just us. Sometimes we have guests, but it's very free form. It's free form shit talking and, it can go to art. It can talk about other things too. We don't have a strong focus like we probably should.
No, I think it works out. I mean, and you'll even have guests on as well.
We have a limited fan base because probably we don't have some of our podcasts used to be 3 hours long, and sometimes now we're trying to make them shorter, but literally we had so much to say that we can go for 3 hours together and no problem.
But you also have video too, which is a component that I've not really managed to figure out. So
we're just doing Zoom ones right now, but then we used to do them in person. I think part of it's limited technology that we don't know well enough. So, I mean, I'm not a recording guy by any means. So I'm like doing it on the fly. Like, I'm using a Mackie mixer and like I'm doing it though. It's like I have old gear. Like this is like probably this probably could have worked 30 years ago with exact gear I'm using. Oh, USB. It is going USB, but aside the USB, everything else is still an XLR mic. Like I'm using, it's old stuff, man. So I don't really know the right ways to do everything, but we're just doing it.
It works. I mean, there's no right way. It's whatever way works for you.
There's gotta be a much easier way with less wires and, and plugging 4 things into a power strip to make this work. You know what I mean? Like this has got to be the worst possible way, but it's the only way I know.
And I know normally during non-COVID times, these are in person. So has the shift to doing them remotely, do you feel it's changed the dynamic of the show at all?
I don't think so. Cause I think Luke and I will still talk the same, but I know he mentioned that he wants to get back in person and, because it's better, but I'm like thinking, you know what? I don't see a difference personally. Like, I don't think there's a difference to me. I feel like we're the same, but I don't know. That's what he says. And I'm like, I don't think so. Like, I feel good about what we do. And I think our repertoire of talking so much before we even podcast and then talking for so long during the podcast affords us to just use Zoom and be just as good and effective, I think. But, I believe that, or I want to believe that.
Awesome. So let's talk about what you have coming up. What does the rest of 2021 look like for you and Giant Robot?
I mean, it's so difficult because it's one of those things where right now in Los Angeles, we might be one of the best cities in the country in terms of COVID, taking care of COVID and having a low number. But at the same time, at least in my area, everybody's still wearing masks on the street. A lot of areas don't. But if you go down to Sawtell, Japantown, where I'm at, everyone's wearing masks outside walking. Like they say you don't have to, but everyone still is. And, my store, everyone's masked up. So I think we've learned to be really careful. And I think for the most part, at least the west side of Los Angeles is, LA is a big place. So there are parts that get kind of crazy, and Orange County is right next door, but where they don't wear masks anymore, never did. Right. I don't think they ever did. Right. So I think our area is extra careful. Like we're really careful. And, because we saw a spike, and maybe some of us learned from, the errors of past, but, I just don't know how things are going to end up still. Like we know that, cause we interviewed Gerald Powell, who's a virologist, and I talked to him recently, and he said, "Oh, the shots you got, cause I was vaccinated." And he said that, "Oh, these are going to last 8 months." Right. And I'm like, "Not a year?" And he said 8 months. He goes, "Wow. Look for this to last 8 months, and you're going to need another shot in like 8 months or after you get after you're vaccinated." And I was thinking, oh, that means like come later this year, people are not going to, if you don't get another shot, you're going to actually be susceptible to getting sick, right? So there's going to be a spike. Healthcare workers are going to get a spike sooner than later because they got the vaccine first in August, maybe, right? They're going to, if we start seeing that, then who knows how bad things can be and how awful it might be, or maybe how good, right? But I can see things going wrong. So it's hard for me to like predict. I mean, I'll still do the art shows, right? I'll probably still keep doing Pop Shop, right? I'll still keep doing what I'm doing. The stores are opening little by little. Like I'll be open today in about an hour or so. The gallery will be open for a little while, and then the stores are open only Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is our retail store open. It's not much. It's like, frankly, we're closed Monday to Thursday. I mean, we're open 7 days normally, right? At the retail store, and the gallery's open, is it 5 days a week normally? And I'm only open 2 days right now. And it's still a little bit, I mean, it's changing. I feel like LA is changing daily. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like there's more and more confidence, consumer confidence. And, it's hard for me to say what's going to happen tomorrow, even because of the change. But I mean, I know that the way I do things, I'm going to keep going, like, no matter what,
Is there any upcoming shows that you want to put on people's radar?
Well, sure. I mean, when does this come out? Like officially?
Mid-June. So
I know that I'll be having a Rob Sato art show. I think that's going to start earlier June. There'll be a group show after that, and 2 group shows after that. And I think I'll have something with Luke Chu by the end of the summer, some kind of maybe a drawing thing, a drawing show or something like that. And, Yosuke, at the end of the year, nice. Katsuya Terada. I just don't know if Katsuya Terada going to come from Japan this year, because he missed last year. He's come 8 years in a row or something like that to do an art show with us. And I don't know if he's going to come this year, because Japan is worse than we are in COVID in terms of getting vaccines done. Okay. It's like they have a weird system there. I didn't realize that. It seems like they have their shit together, right? You're like, oh, of course Japan's better.
Yeah. Or that we're just really bad. The way I see it is just we're just the worst in the world.
we are, but Japan's got like a government that sort of like does its thing. It's known to be very corrupt, but there's also very little citizen participation. So it's sort of like this bad thing that's happening. Everyone accepts that it's bad and it's corrupt. And there's like 2% of the people have been vaccinated in Japan right now. And why? Oh, wow. Like, wow. Shouldn't that be like 30 or 20 or, but in the end, it's like this really low number because they can't figure out how to roll out the vaccines, because it's like governments trying to, it's like local governments, state government, national government, just all kind of like in confusion and nobody on the same page. And, no, I think that part is worse than maybe everywhere. It's one of the worst. And you would think it's the best, but it's all hidden. You sort of don't know. Then you hear about like, oh, they don't test well, so therefore there's not a lot of cases. Like, you don't know, but supposedly there's a lot of cases. And
that's crazy.
But then it's just not reported because it's not tested and things like that. We just don't know. Like the information, everyone who's like pretty aware knows that things are really messed up there. That all my friends in Japan are like, oh man, the government here is just so bad, but there's no participation, or like it's pretty quiet. Like everyone's like, well, it's accepted that it sucks. And we still have to go on with life, but it's like they don't know, So the Olympics are supposed to happen in Japan, and everyone I know says no, it shouldn't happen. But then the people at the heads are saying, yeah, it's going to happen, and things like that. It's just like a mess. So I think in some ways we're still worse, but that's a weird way of being worse too. Yeah. In some ways that's worse. I don't know. Yeah, but it's I'm doing our art shows, and you could always look at our Giant Robot calendar. And we have that. But yeah, no, we keep going, doing our thing. And I guess I'm like, are we going to do a postage show this year? I don't know.
That's normally in like December, right?
Yeah. And I don't know if that's going to happen as is. So in that way. So those are all question marks. And I'm willing, I'll roll with however it works. You know what I'm saying? I'll roll with it. And if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, we'll do something else. But I think that's kind of, the way I go is just try to be flexible and malleable to situations. And if it opens up better, I'll open up more. But, there's some businesses in my area it felt like they stayed open the whole time. And I'm like, it's pretty unsafe. It felt very unsafe, but they were wide open all the time. And I'd see like 5 people walk out of a shop with no masks on. And I'm like, okay, you guys are just going to take anything. And I'm just, we were the last on our block to open. Like we didn't open until, is it a month and a half ago or something? We've been closed since last March, and we went all the way till like, April or something, and not let a person in hardcore, like no. So,
well, I mean, I think it speaks to like you wanting to care about the safety of both your employees and your customers. I mean,
that was really important. And I let them pick what hours they want to work at this point. Like, if they're saying, hey, like let's open and close at this time, this is what's best for me. And I feel safe this way, like letting only 3 or 4 or 5 people in at a time. I said, okay, let's do it. Because whereas the other stores, I'm like, I bet you from the top, they're like, let in as whatever, like I don't see any signs saying limitation of people. We have a limit. So there's a line at Giant Robot store to get in right now. Right. But I told the person, I'm like, you got to do what you feel safe. And if that's what I accept it. Like it's acceptable to me. Whereas the other stores, I think they're just letting whoever they want in there. Like it seems like it, because I've seen too many people inside on some store, like little stores. I'm like, there's a lot of people in this tiny ass store, and I'm like, no, we have a limit, and I let we police it ourselves, and we're going by the comfort that we feel, and But I think that's important. Again, it's sustainability for me. It's like if I make my employees feel unsafe, then that's not sustainable. No. That's a horrible way to go. And I kind of want to, make sure that they feel safe and we are safe. So, and that's if that's over being over paranoid, so be it. I'm okay with that. And I'm willing to take whatever losses, financial losses, to make sure that works, that's important. So,
super important.
I have no complaints about how it's operating. I mean, our hours are much shorter right now than normal. But if this is the comfort level, then I'm going to let that be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. So as we start to close out, obviously you've accomplished a lot throughout your career. You've worn a lot of hats: publisher, store owner, gallerist. You're a restaurateur at one point. So what are you most proud of? I mean, that's probably a tough question, but like, what do you think, looking back on your career, makes you the most proud?
I think just doing Giant Robot my way kind of makes. I mean, if I can be proud of something, it's doing it my way, however flawed that might be, but it still works, type of a thing. I think maybe there's that. I mean, there's so many little milestones that we've passed, but I'm kind of I don't know, I say it all the time, but I'm kind of a going forward person. Like I'm thinking about today, like later today, and I'm thinking about tomorrow, and then, a week later, maybe a month later, and that's about it. But I'm not a look back into past accomplishments kind of a guy. Like we talked about it a lot today, which is crazy, but usually no, I'm not thinking about that stuff at all. So it's always difficult for me to like think milestones. I mean, we did a lot of museum shows before. I mean, museum shows, it's like I see like there's a little more pop culture in museums these days. But I think I was doing it pretty early. I won't say first, right? Nothing like that. But I've done a lot of shows with the artists I work with in museum spaces. I think before a lot of other people got that opportunity. And at great museums too. Like Oakland Museum of California was a huge museum for us to do this giant event. And I think we broke the records of attendance and all that stuff, and museums have changed, right? Gone through a overhaul, I think. But I think we were part of that process of making this overhaul happen at some museums. And then, it's trickled out for sure. I'm not saying we're the start of it, but I know that we pushed a little more of, a little bit of how I work into how a museum works. I've done that a bunch of times. I think we did about 10 museum shows. So each one of those, we left our own imprint there. And there's that. I mean, there's so many little things, but I don't know. Like I said, I don't count those things at all. It takes, maybe there's one day someone will research it for me and remind me of things, because there's been so many little things that I'm proud of. Even how we dealt with COVID, I'm very proud of this. I mean, there's a business 101 book I could probably write of how to run things and do things and think of things and be malleable, but yet, make sure that we're structurally sound. And I think there's that, being very flexible. And I don't think a lot of other businesses may be as flexible as I am to change. Everyone's got their own, I watch those kitchen nightmare shows like everybody else. And those things are crazy. When I watch that, I'm like, wow, eye-opening as to how people run businesses. And maybe those are the worst of the worst, but the fact that they're in business at that moment and still running and doing it that way, I'm like, oh, that's when I think I'm like, okay, there's all different kinds of people. So I like to think that, I'm kind of malleable in some ways and, just doing things a little bit differently and willing to try new things and keep moving forward. I don't know.
Awesome. Very
Sorry,
cool.
man. That's a crappy answer, huh?
No, I think it was great. So I guess where can people, follow Giant Robot to see what you got coming up next?
So I guess giantrobot.com, our website, but then there's also the Instagram Giant Robot and Giant Robot Store, both of them, very different from each other. And both of them, maybe Giant Robot's more art focused. Giant Robot Store is a little more store and culture focused. So there's two little Instagrams there. And, I think that's kind of most of the ways to follow us.
Very cool. So last question, and this is something that I like to ask everybody. Who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
Wow. I don't know if I looked at your entire roster. I looked at some. I mean, have you had Luke Chu on?
No, I haven't.
I don't think you have. And I was thinking, Luke Chu's always a good one to have. He's, get James Jean, I could always suggest but I think Luke Chu is great because, I think he's extremely intelligent, more than he lets on. And he's probably one of the best problem solvers I know. Whereas, there's people who problem solve, but being kind of sloppy that he is and sloppy that I am, like in some ways, that requires good problem solving. So I think I'm decent at it. I think he's really good at it. Meaning that also speaks negatively a little bit that we're both sloppy and making problems. We're making problems to solve, but he's really good at solving problems. I think I'd put him in a room with a bunch of ad agency people to help solve advertising issues and problems. He's really creative and smart. So, I'd put him up against anybody that way.
Very cool. Eric, thank you so much for coming on and joining me today. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. Definitely.
So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Eric. I have an incredible amount of respect for what Eric's managed to accomplish in his career. But I think what's most important to me and what stands out the most to me is how he approaches what he does. In an interview I read in preparation for this chat, Eric was answering a question about how he approached his work with Giant Robot. And he said, quote, "Sometimes it's just a person trying to keep a business going, but for me, I'm trying to add to culture." And my mind kept going back to that when we were talking and what he said about always wanting to be authentic and, only writing about and promoting stuff that he genuinely believed in and was passionate about, rather than just something because it was, profitable. Ultimately creating experiences for the people who, like him, felt like an outsider. That really resonated with me. And I really love what he had to say about how, working with some of the more notable artists that he does, like, James Jean, Audrey Kawasaki, has allowed him to take risks with newer, up-and-coming artists, lifting them up and, giving them a platform and a real chance at gaining meaningful exposure, paying it forward in a very real way. Their Post-it show is such a perfect example of this, and it's one of the reasons that I love that show so much. And I feel like that focus on the community is at the core of everything that Eric's done, and I really admire him for that. So thanks again to Eric for joining me today, and thank you for checking out the show. I'm truly grateful for your support. And just a reminder, one big way you can help out if you're really enjoying the show would be to check out the show's Patreon. You can find all the details on patreon.com/artaffairs. As always, you can contact me through my website at artaffairs.podcast.com or on Instagram at artaffairs.podcast. So until next time, be good to yourself and be good to each other.